listening to the Marketing Personalities Podcast, a podcast for growth-minded entrepreneurs that serves up valuable insight and interviews about aligning your marketing strategy with your personality type. Because here's the deal. You shouldn't have to feel fake and salesy in order to grow your business. And you no longer have to. Your marketing strategy can feel good to implement and it can work. You can attract the right clients and customers to your business and grow your profits, all while staying true to who you naturally are. So in the name of honest business growth, bring your unique talents, perspectives, and personality to the table. And join us on this week's podcast episode to discover marketing that feels good for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. I'm Brit Kolo, and I'm here today with Joey Vitale, who is the founder of Indie Law. Joey, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you here. Joey and I are here today to discuss how he is marketing his law firm as an INFJ. Like, what is an INFJ doing practicing law? I know we will get to that. And I think you're going to, no, I don't think. I know you all are going to just love Joey. I think he's a super cool human. I'm so glad he's here. And before we dig into all of that, you've got to get to know this guy. Okay, so Joey, first of all, tell us about your entrepreneurial life right now. What do you have your hands in? What's going on?
Sure. So, man, I'm so excited for you to just diagnose me on all of this.
Oh, no, I don't diagnose.
Well, maybe that's the wrong word, but I love it when I kind of share with you how, what my journey's been, where my head's at, and you kind of letting me know how that's aligning with my type.
Yeah. Because
I know how much you love that message and your mission of helping people kind of fit more with their marketing. And it's always just so good to hear that I'm where I should be, and you kind of letting me know how I'm just kind of fitting in with my personality traits.
Oh, that's so good to hear. I'm beaming right now because I know it is kind of like diagnosing. Some people hear that word and they're like, wait, do not psychoanalyze me right now. And I try really hard not to, but you're right. You and I have had several conversations, I feel like so far, where there's this thing going on in your marketing or in your business. And I do love to just speak into that situation and be like, oh yeah, you're fine. You're good. If that feels good to you, you're good. Let's do that, And we're going to get into one of those stories here eventually because we had a really good one come up in the last couple months. So I'm glad that you appreciate that from me.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of kind of what I have my hands in right now, and we can circle back and forth into different things, but the main thing is I currently am in a position where I have the background of going to law school, having a law degree, working with entrepreneurs. And what I love doing is helping give people peace of mind and security in a very kind of growth-minded place. And so what that means in my context now is helping people kind of cross off the things that they should be crossing off at this stage in their business, worrying about the certain legal risks that are kind of most on their radar, and then really preparing them for growth on the legal side. And so, yes, having kind of a foundation of playing defense in your business, but also seeing what we can do to leverage the legal side so that you can get where you want to go faster.
Okay, I love how you just explained that. It's like playing the defense when you need to so you can play better offense.
Right, exactly.
Right? Are you a football fan? I'm a huge college football fan. And we are right in the smack dab middle of college football season. And y'all, if you're a football fan, you know what wins football games. Defense wins football games. And so I love that you just brought that up. And it's super true. You can have the best offense ever and score all the points. But if your defense sucks, the other team is going to score all the points too. So come on. You got to have a solid defense in play. And when we're talking about business, It might not be the sexiest thing. Like everybody wants to be the quarterback and throw the game winning touchdown, but we've got to have that legal stuff in play, that defense in play. So when we do throw the touchdown, we still win. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I see it in so many areas as a business owner myself, that if I'm trying to take steps to grow my business, whether it's hopping on a live video and doing something, or trying to work with affiliate and promo partners, or anything else that's growing the business, if I feel like I don't have the structure and the processes to kind of support me doing that, or to take care of the other parts of the business while I'm doing it, then I kind of get sucked back in. And I'm not the biggest sports buff in the room, but my family is. My wife's a huge basketball fan. That is one of the things that I really have seen, just kind of personally, kind of a mindset thing, is that you need that peace of mind that you're going to be like fine, so that you can take those leaps.
100%. Yes. And some of that comes innately as a business owner. I think a lot of us can relate to the idea of like, man, I just feel called. I just feel like this is the next step. That's not all entrepreneurs, because the thinkers that are listening, the third letter T's, the thinkers are like, no, well, yeah, I felt it, but like I also had it down in a spreadsheet. And then those of us who are feelers, like you and I, are like, oh yeah, I just like felt it and it was right. And then there are parts of our businesses in the beginning and all throughout that we have to literally have a defense up for and with, so we can still move forward. I definitely have seen that in my own business. And that's why I've consulted with you in the past, because I know that at some point, marketing personalities got to a place where, hey, I need to trademark this thing, because if I don't, it would be totally silly not to. Like, I could completely lose everything if I didn't have a trademark. Do I want to go into figuring out trademarks? Absolutely not. That's why I called Joey. But this is the kind of thing that you're helping people think about, but only think about for a little sec, because then you get to go do it. Like, we think about it for a second and then be like, oh yeah, can you help me with that? And then you do. So super, super grateful that you've chosen to do this. Now, I'm curious, take us back. Why law? What drove you to study it? What made you niche into trademark? And then what made you start your own firm? Like, just tell me the whole thing, because I don't know anything about this, and I'm curious what made you go down this path.
Sure. So it's a pretty atypical story, I think. My journey, I don't think is a very common one, but I think there are parts of it that people can be like, oh yeah, like I can kind of see that. So when I was little and people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I never had any clue. So I went to college basically with an honors undecided major. And then when I was a junior in college that summer, my dad and I were driving around and he was like, so what do you think you're going to do after you graduate? And I was like, I don't know. There's a couple of things that I might want to do, maybe law school. And the reason I even thought law school was it's kind of an undecided master's degree. Like everybody says, if you can do anything with a law degree. And my dad has a very traditional idea of professions. So it's either you become a doctor or a lawyer, or you join the family construction business. So he was like, well, if you go to law school, I'll buy you a new car. And I was like, oh, okay, well then let's do that then. And so I went to law school not really knowing what I was going to do. And I don't know how many friends you had that went through law school, how well you kind of know that environment, but it's number one, it's a very competitive space. Even if it's I had a really nice group of classmates, but this ranking system totally blindsided me. And there was this idea that if you weren't in like the top 20% of your class, it would be really hard to get a job. And so I started making career decisions on like what would be a safe way for me to get a job when I graduate, and not so much like what do I want to do. And so the kind of easiest path that I saw was asking a family friend if I could intern at his law firm, impress his team, and then join his firm, which is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a medical malpractice defense firm for 2 years. So basically, like, I helped hospitals when like sponges were left in bodies and stuff.
Oh gosh.
And yeah, so it was really sad. My wife is like, don't tell me what happened, like in the deposition that you read today. So I learned a couple of things at that firm. Number one was that I hated confrontation. And I guess I always knew that about myself, but like it took me actually like having to be in a courtroom environment to be like, oh yeah, no, like this is making me much more anxious and stressed out than anybody else in the room. And so I really just learned that like being like the fighter in the courtroom was not a good fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really know what else there was to do with the law degree, but it got to a point where I was just really unhappy. And this might speak to my INFJ-ness, but the more that I realized I wasn't good at it, the more I started overthinking everything, the longer it took me to do like research and writing assignments. And I became a worse and worse associate at that firm over time because I was so afraid of continuing to do things wrong or working on stuff I knew I wasn't good at. So I eventually left the firm without really a plan B. I was just like, there are a couple other options. Maybe if I just find a version of that firm with a different set of people, or like they can help me do something that is more aligned. I started to network with other lawyers and was actually interning at a job that was pretty much the exact same as the one that I had left, just because I felt like I needed to find something, when I met another lawyer who was working with business owners. And so I decided to not go to the other law firm and instead work what's called of counsel for this other lawyer out of St. Louis. And that was my entry kind of gateway drug entrepreneurship. So it was from this other attorney that I learned about like Gary Vaynerchuk, the 4-Hour Work Week.
Oh, you got sucked in.
Yeah.
Me too. If nothing else, the Gary V, the 4-Hour Work Week, these big loud voices in this industry that once you get into it, like sometimes you're just like, man, dude, shut up. But in the beginning, you're like, oh, that is some shiny stuff over there. And that looks a lot different from my beige life over here in this cubicle. And so I'm going to go see what's going on over there. God love them.
Right?
For being they are. Like,
I love that attitude.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So that's kind of how I started doing that there. I started to, build up this confidence of helping business owners more proactively than waiting until someone files a lawsuit, which I loved. And I realized that there was this way where I could be an attorney and use that skill set and help people. And it was, when that happened, it was super eye-opening for me because I realized that the same traits that made me feel like I was a really bad litigator were making me a really good partner for these other business owners.
Mm.
So I continued to work for her. Eventually, she and I decided that we were going to kind of take things in different directions. So she was really serving this kind of startup space with kind of startup founders, people who work out of a lot of like co-work spaces. And I was starting to get to know this kind of other side of entrepreneurship. I didn't really know what to call it at the time, but I found this business coach that was like, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own business? And I was like, yeah, I think I have the confidence and the skill set now to kind of try something on my own, but I don't really know who I would serve. And as much as I love kind of the business owner side of things, I'd really rather not work with startups because they tend to not have money. and have really complicated things that they're asking for. So it's kind of hard to build a business model around that need. And she said, have you ever thought about serving Etsy store owners? So when I created my law firm, that was my niche, was people on Etsy.
Wow.
And we did everything from LLC formations to kind of drafting their online contracts and agreements to trademarks. And eventually I got to meet more and more people in this kind of wider net of creative entrepreneurs. And the same kind of package of services was also something that this wider group needed. And I came to a place where I knew the law relatively well. I started to get to know the practical side of what their needs were a lot more than just how to do the legal stuff for them.
Yeah.
And as I got more and more insight into like the actual pain points, the actual things that were holding businesses back and allowing them to grow, the more I realized that trademarks in particular are this misunderstood area of the law where people really need at more of a foundational level. And instead, they were asking for things like LLCs and contracts. And so we really wanted to dive into trademarks specifically and do that well with owners.
I mean, that makes so much sense. You're right. The first question is, do I need an LLC? Second question is, how do I form one? Third one is, how do I create a contract so I don't get screwed, right? And then it's like you're kind of off to the races and you forget to ask any other legal questions. I mean, I say you, but I'm saying like, yeah, that was totally my situation. Like that's what I did. And I see a lot of other people doing that. And thankfully, I've had the professional counsel in my life through my mastermind for people to be like, yo, you should probably trademark this. And so I did. But it's so often missed and it's so needed overall. I super love how you have been willing to niche into places where I don't think most people would go, like most lawyers would go. And that I think is such a testament to your self-awareness. Whether you consciously did this or not, I'm sure that there's a conscious level to this because you're a smart guy and you're obviously very self-aware. But regardless, I am just really grateful that you chose to go down these pathways when you did, because this group of people that you're serving 100% needs you, and not just needs you and like the trademarks that you do, but they need you, Joey. Like you as a person, as an INFJ, as the person that you just like naturally are, you fit so well in this space. Like I want to work with you.
Thank you.
People in our space want to work with someone like you. And I think I saw that from the very beginning. And I'm just really grateful that you listened to all of these different places. I heard like in your story, so many different pivot points where you could have gone down a completely opposite track, I feel like, and you didn't. And I'm just really grateful. I'm just really grateful that you didn't, because I believe you belong here, and I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot. It's interesting looking back because at certain points it felt like I was really kind of pendulum swinging and kind of making drastic, kind of big changes with the direction of where things were going. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there was never a point where I was like, this direction isn't working. Let me try out this new shiny object thing, or I'm bored with what I'm doing. And it's never felt like a turn in an opposite direction. It's always kind of been this like, I may not know where my destination is, but I can kind of feel where it is. And the decisions that I'm making are pivots going back to that same gut feeling that I have.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that gut feeling is your intuition, and you're an INFJ, which I'll break this down for the listeners. If you're not an INFJ or you're not sure about what that means, I stands for introvert, N stands for intuitive, F stands for feeling, and J stands for judging. So a couple things about the INFJ personality type. they say it's the rarest personality type of all the 16. I will say though that in this space, in this entrepreneurial business owner space, I find INFJs freaking everywhere. Like they don't seem very rare. Same thing with INTJs. They're the second rarest type, but they're freaking everywhere in this online entrepreneurial small business space. And I know that there are some interesting things at play there that encourage INFJs and INTJs to pursue entrepreneurship and creation of their own thing rather than falling into any other path, and working for someone else, following someone else's rules. I think you illustrated this really well, Joey, in your story of there was a turning point for you when you were at that first law firm out of law school where you realized that you hated confrontation, courtrooms were not for you, and it sounded like it just wasn't like the type of work you were doing didn't hold a strong enough why for you. Like it just, there was enough dissonance where you started, even though you're a smart guy, even though you could do the work, I'm sure you could, like it wasn't like you didn't have the skill set to do it. It was just that you had lost your inner driver, that why of why you were doing it. And you said you let the work slip. That is so INFJ. Like that is so INFJ, because if you don't have that solid why behind you, you're not in it. And that's okay. Me too. Like any diplomat, anybody in the diplomat tribe with the N and the F in the middle, if you don't have a solid why, you're out. And that's fine. That's cool. It's going to lead you to better stuff, as it has for Joey.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you mentioned that really, I think, stands out to me as such an asset of your personality type that you leaned into, thankfully, is that you found that once you started working with these business owners, you went from reactive work to proactive work. And that proactively working on building a defense rather than reactively creating a defense when something's gone wrong, that felt better for you. And it's no wonder if you're an INFJ, you are also known as the advocate. You're probably quite a visionary. You've got the skill set to integrate, but you're a visionary and you are seeing ahead of most people and wanting to get ahead of the curve and advocating for people to do that for themselves. You're probably not going to like get in there and hold their hand at every single step of the turn, which is probably why you're not like a business coach. You're a trademark lawyer. So you're like really helping them with this one piece that they need, but you still want to be proactive about it. That reactivity does not feel good. And I will tell you, as someone who is in the same tribe, that diplomat tribe, I agree. Reactive work to me, anything where I feel like I'm not ahead of the game, feels so crappy. Like if I just have to react to whatever comes into my inbox, I am like out. I am out. I can't do it. But if I feel like I'm ahead of the game, like I was telling you before before we hit record, like I batch literally everything I do, and that's me being proactive, and I can't work otherwise. And you naturally found this in your work and you leaned into it. So bravo. I'm glad you did.
Well, thank you. And that reminds me of something, and it's been a hard lesson learned these past couple of weeks. So what you said really resonated with me, because when you talk about us not feeling great in those episodes of being reactive, as a business owner, something that I've noticed myself doing, especially over the last year, is wanting to delegate stuff that doesn't feel good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we recently have been making some changes in the business. And long story short, the levers that we used to kind of pull marketing and sales wise, knowing that it would generate revenue, the changes that we made kind of resulted in us losing a sense of those levers.
Mm.
And I tried to have the same people on my team that was handling the more kind of reactive stuff, helping me come up with a solution for kind of refinding those levers. And I learned that those types of people who, for whatever reason, they kind of do like the reactive stuff, as long as there's a process in place and they can do it, they don't, and I don't want to call it I don't want to put a judgment on it. So I don't want to call it like drive or ambition, because they are, but they don't have as much of that visionary in them,
right,
to think about new ways.
Yes, the difference between a visionary and an integrator.
And I know it's a little bit off track.
Well, no, it's not off track. It's a really great distinction to know about your team and about yourself, because it allows you to set better expectations when you know that about yourself and or your team and or your partner and or your business friend or whatever. Like if you know whether they prefer proactive or reactive work, therefore like visionary or integrator, you won't give them the opposite as much. And so you won't expect, you won't expect so much out of their opposite preference. Same with anything in their personality type. So yeah, that's totally on base.
Yeah. And I've done kind of personality tests with a team before, and I'm just now starting to realize how helpful it actually is.
Yeah. Well, it's so multifaceted. I mean, it's like endless.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So INFJ happening all over the place. I'm curious. We know that as an INFJ, we know that creating and publishing long form content is part of your best marketing strategy, because what doesn't feel good to you as an INFJ is to go straight into a sales conversation without educating your prospect and making sure they know what they're getting before they purchase, right? Like that direct sales conversation can feel really crappy to you if you don't feel like that person's been educated well. So to make sure that sales conversation feels good for everybody, you've got some long form content and long form indoctrination to do before you get them into that sales conversation. Is that all feeling accurate?
Yeah. Well, it's not only accurate, but it also, this conversation is like really creating a lot of light bulb moments for me, because one of the things that's difficult about trademarks is that there's a huge like education gap. As I know, we can kind of speak to your own experience, but a lot of businesses, when they decide to ultimately invest in some trademark help, they feel like they did it too late, or they kind of waited longer than they should have.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, that makes my job feel harder, because I'm having to kind of connect the dots a little bit more than maybe in other services that somebody might sell to a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
because there's not that direct, like, I can help you make money type of promise in helping you with your trademarks. But I do think that I kind of like that challenge, and I do feel much more comfortable in the sales process with making sure that they have really understood how I can help them. And I do definitely love longer form stuff, but I've also learned that I feel bogged down by the potential editing and prep work that goes into the long form stuff. So because of that, I decided to go down the like Facebook Live path when I started, and have been doing that pretty prominently ever since.
Yeah. And that's a really great distinction that I love that you just brought up, because I give INFJs the main advice to create long form content and content, some people hear that depending on what industry you're in, you'll hear content and you'll think of something different. Like everybody has their kind of own perspective on what content is. And some people are going to think blog posts. Some people are going to think, well, anything that you create and put out for your prospect, that's content. And then you have content for your customer. And it's just like all over the place. But that's a great distinction. Content is not necessarily just written word, like in a blog post or in an article or something. We're creating content right now for the podcast, and you're creating content every single time you do a Facebook Live. Now, what's interesting to me is that you chose Facebook Live as opposed to a recorded video. Well, actually, video at all, because I would say probably a majority of INFJs are going to shy away from video. But I like that you were like, no, but I don't want all of the production time and in the weeds of production. So what's the fastest, easiest way for me to get this out to my people? It's going to be a Facebook Live. No editing, no like recording, uploading, getting it on all that. Nope. It's just hit the button, say some things, get off. Right. And like, if that feels good for you and works for you, hey, obviously I'm going to support that. And I love it. And it's definitely a differentiator because I don't think there are very many trademark attorneys out there that are doing that. So that's a bonus.
Right. Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's so many ways to do this. And I think if you ever wanted to, not like you're doing enough already, Brit, but like you could dig into like how each personality type can do a Facebook Live. Because the way that I do it, it is longer form. It is kind of like the main piece of content that I do each week. Usually the videos that I do are about 20 to 30 minutes. And it's this idea of like, I kind of have a loose agenda, but I want to talk through these points. And I kind of see speaking in general as like a long form content that I've always been drawn to. And I do think it's really fascinating when it comes to like introverts, which I am, and speaking, because I do think that I think a lot of people think that being an introvert means that you probably shouldn't be on stage, or like for whatever reason, that would be like a bad thing. And I do think that in some ways, being an introvert has really helped me out with speaking because I do love kind of talking with people, but I think for me, I really like being listened to, like when I feel like I have something to say. And it can sometimes feel like if I'm just chatting with somebody and it's more of a conversation, that I don't have the time that I need to like craft what I actually think.
Yes.
And it happens all the time. I'm talking with people and they're like, Joey, like, don't hold back. Like, what are you thinking right now? I'm like, I don't know what I'm thinking right now. I'm trying to put words to it. And having that space to craft a talk and to really fine tune and like draft what I want to tell somebody is a really helpful way for me to make content for people.
Yes. I literally just typed this quote in because I need to share this with every INFJ I know because it feels so true. And it was, you said, I really like being listened to when I really have something to say. And that feels extremely INFJ because again, INFJ, they're known as the advocate. Like you have stuff to say. Every INFJ has an opinion, probably a pretty strong opinion about a lot of things or just a couple things in life. And when they get that in them, when they get that fire rolling in their belly, it's going to come out. And sometimes it comes out through books. INFJs are some of the most prolific writers and also some of the most prolific speakers. And it's because they've given themselves the space to identify what that fire is all about. And then they let the fire just continue to get bigger and bigger. And they feel like, I just need to get this out to people. They're going to advocate for that message. And what you're kind of outlining here, and it's something that is in the new version of the full reports now, is identifying what type of content is best for you to create. And a lot of times, you kind of already hit on it a little bit. A lot of times people think that introverts write and extroverts speak, and that's not true at all. What is true is that the type of content that you create is more related to, in my opinion, it's more related to how you process information. And some people are internal processors while others are external processors. And that does not relate to whether you're introverted or extroverted at all. It's more about how you're processing information. An internal processor is someone who is going to kind of ruminate on the information they're processing. If they get it out of their head at all, it's going to be into a journal. A lot of times it just stays in their head for a few days and they need to ruminate. And that's what breeds clarity. And then others, and I'm kind of thinking like you might be in between, but others, if you're an external processor, which I am raising my hand, I'm like 100% an external processor. The things that I'm thinking can't stay in my head for too long, or else I will literally go batshit crazy. I need to get them out. Like I need to at a minimum, get them onto a page. And best case scenario, I'm able to talk it out and not make any kind of sense in the beginning, but talk it out. And that's going to help me. And so typically internal processors are going to be better at, or not better at, I'm going to take that back. They're going to feel better about creating content that is written, while external processors are going to feel better about creating content that is spoken word, whether that's just audio or audio and video. And sometimes right there in the middle of internal and external, you get someone who is super prolific at writing a great speech and delivering it. And I kind of feel like that's you, Joey.
That's so interesting. And I think that this is something that we talked about before. I can't remember. We had so many awesome conversations. But recently somebody was like, Joey, we were kind of talking marketing strategy. And I was telling them that I'm still working on my Instagram game. Like, I really like the idea of being in videos a lot on Instagram with stories, but it's just, for some reason, it's been difficult for me. And I think it was you, either directly or indirectly, that helped me realize that, like, the thing that was drawing me to like videos on the live streaming Facebook side didn't mean that, like, doing videos in these 15-second snippets on Instagram would feel just as nicely.
Right.
But yeah, going back to the point that you made about kind of being in there, I do think that I'm somewhere in the middle, because I really like refining my thoughts. Like, one of the things that I loved about school was, like, if I found a teacher and a topic that I loved, and, like, that idea of, like, working on something and getting kind of a closed room of feedback as I was working on it was really helpful. I do think this is such an interesting conversation, because I think a lot of people and business owners specifically, when it comes to kind of filling these blanks in your business, like, what's your marketing going to be like? Should you want to speak or not? And if so, what's your strategy? I think that a lot of people assume that there's, like, a one-size-fits-all blueprint.
Mm-hmm. And there never is. Ever.
Yeah.
So stop looking for it.
Right.
So the one thing that you said was the Facebook Lives feel good, but then the Instagram stories, like, they're both video. Why is Instagram stories feeling so difficult? And I think we've had this conversation. If we haven't, regardless, I'm going to tell the listeners that why that probably is. When you are an INFJ, you love to go deep on any topic. Surface level kind of conversation is not your jam, never was, never will be. And so if you get to speak about something, have a conversation with someone, you want to go deep into that thing. Well, a Facebook Live can literally be as long as you want it to be. I think there might be a maximum, but you're not going to reach it.
Right.
But then an Instagram story is 15 freaking seconds long. Like, there's all this pressure to take all of what you're thinking and feeling and put it into 15 seconds. And that, for a deep feeling, intuitive human, feels pretty freaking impossible. And it takes a lot of practice. There are some ways around it. Like, you could record a video just on your phone and then splice it up on Instagram, which people do, and you can totally do that. That's kind of like a way around it. But that, just to circle back to that thought that you had, like, if that's happening for you, listener, that might be why. And it's okay. You're not broken. It's not it's not Instagram stories' fault. It's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way that you're wired. Do what feels good. Forget the rest. I want to talk about what I think really sparked you and I starting to talk to each other and creating a great business relationship. You had a situation a couple months ago where a marketing strategy was advised to you or suggested to you, and it just didn't feel good for you to show up that way. Like, it didn't sit well with you. You weren't really sure why. And you and I just started DMing in Instagram about it. So can you take us into what was going on there in that situation? What wasn't feeling good? And then we can go into, like, maybe why that was the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was starting to pick up on this theme from a couple different experts that I follow when it came to marketing, that said that your marketing should be divisive. And, you can attract a stronger, more loyal following if you say something that will be divisive, will make some people not like you and want to follow you because a certain amount of people will agree with what you're saying. And it felt uncomfortable sometimes creating content where I was taking a strong stance, and those types of posts where you're like, I know this will ruffle some feathers, but fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And there had been times in the past where I would write certain types of content that they were kind of uncomfortable to write, but I was like, you know what, it's worth it. Let me put it out there. And then the response was also uncomfortable. Like I was getting enough people, which was great to kind of see people saying, we agree with this. Thanks for sharing. I'm glad someone is saying it this way. And then people who didn't agree were very loud and not agreeing. And I was like, how do I respond to these people?
Yeah. And I was so glad that you brought that up, because you're right. It's a theme that you picked up on, and it's pretty common to hear this. I mean, I've been hearing it a lot. Be divisive, be polarizing, ruffle feathers, piss people off and see what happens. Because if you piss somebody off, you make someone else be like, yes, I'm so glad you said that, right? And so to be polarizing creates people who definitely don't like you and people that definitely do like you. And it's valid. I'm definitely not here to say that that's wrong. It's true. I can see it. I can see the zeitgeist effect that happens in basically everything in life. And that's what we're getting to. And for some personality types, that's not going to feel good. And I take the stance, and this is what Joey and I had a conversation about, was that, like, if that doesn't feel right for you, that's okay. You don't have to be polarizing. You don't have to be divisive. Let's dig into maybe why this is coming up for you. So maybe we can find kind of a compromise here. Maybe we can't. I don't know. But what we ended up talking about was realizing that the main person that was telling you to be divisive, we know to be a thinking type, an intuitive thinking type. So in the analyst tribe. So if you're an analyst, INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, ENTP, you probably hear that advice to be divisive and ruffle feathers, and you're like, hell yeah, let me do that. Like you're some of the most rebellious people. You do want to ruffle feathers. That does not scare you. Confrontation does not freak you out. So understand that that's a preference for you, and that's super cool. Totally do you, boo. Like totally do you. And I remember our conversation being around the fact that you're an intuitive feeler, Joey. And so for you, you can logically, mentally wrap your mind around why the divisiveness and the polarity would be helpful, but you can't get over the feeling that you're pissing people off and ruffling feathers. And so your feeling aspect of your personality, your preference to make decisions from feelings rather than your thoughts, it's going to take precedence. It's going to be a higher priority. And therefore, you can, in a completely valid way, say, I can see why that would work, and I'm not going to do it because it doesn't feel right for me. And that's cool. Like, that's totally fine. So that difference between the NT and the NF, it's a big one that can make a whole world of difference. And again, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I've had that conversation with so many other people since you brought it up to me. And I think it's kind of life-changing within business and marketing. Like, oh, I don't have to piss people off. Great. Like, I can move forward feeling better now and get back into that genuine, authentic way that I can communicate with people without feeling like I have to be fake about being divisive and polarizing, right? So yeah, so that's good.
Yeah.
Tell me about like how you received that and what that has like kind of become for you.
I really appreciated when you just let me know that it was like, it's okay not to have a divisive marketing strategy, with the goal being like, me being divisive is what is going to be good for my business. So I'm going to be divisive. Worded in that way. At the same time, what I have to get over is that like not everybody's going to like me, and I shouldn't not put stuff out for fear of what people are going to say. And so for me, it's kind of balancing and kind of being more aware of what I'm thinking, why I'm wanting to speak on certain things, because I do think that there are myths and mistakes out there that I want to speak to, but I don't want to address them from a place of being divisive or polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a way I'm trying to get better at it of saying, I do think that this is a myth and this is a mistake. And I'm calling out and talking about it because I think it can help you. Like having that same piece of content that calls it out be of value and not just be like people who agree and disagree argue about it in the comments.
Right. Oh, yes. That's such a good way to frame all of that up. There's this balance where you can take a stand because, again, you're an INFJ. You have stuff to say. You've got an opinion. Like, okay, we've got some stuff that we're working on here and we're not afraid to talk about it. And you can do that all while not intentionally poking the bear just to poke the bear.
Right. So one of the things that I've done that's been really helpful, and if you remember my story, like I kind of came into entrepreneurship through a back door, and I've learned a lot of business and marketing things in, I don't want to say backwards ways, but I'll tell people about something that I learned and they're like, oh yeah, that's called this. And so I just be prepared to be like, to terminologize what I'm saying if there's like a well-known term for it. But one of the things that I've been doing recently, my coach calls a ladder of beliefs. And so there's this idea that when people have this ultimate belief that they have when they decide to buy from you, and before they say that, they kind of make their way up these rungs of different beliefs. And so the goal of marketing should be to meet them where they are at, mm-hmm. and kind of walk them up that ladder. And what I found, especially when it comes to trademarks, is that a lot of those beliefs are challenging what you think you know or learning new things and having aha moments. And so I'm trying to kind of place these things that I want to disprove or kind of go against the grain on, like necessary learning opportunities, not so much like, here's me being different for the sake of being different.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is so true. Like how you just said that, it's so accurate. Like you can take a stand in a couple different ways. And what you just explained is the advocacy way to take a stand. Whereas the one who's doing it just to be different is still totally valid. If that's you, go do that, please. That's just the rebellious way to do it, which is fine, which is totally okay.
Yeah.
So I love it. Yes. It's great.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how many other INFJs don't have any tattoos. Speaking of rebels.
Oh, I know a lot of INFJs. And I know I'm just like running through the Rolodex. A lot of them have tattoos. Why do you say that? You think they just don't do it?
Yeah. Danny Fountain has a lot.
Yeah.
Well, when you said like the rebel, I don't want to equate having a tattoo with being a rebel, but that's where my mind goes. Cause like my thing is like, I don't have any tattoos because my dad would tear them off of me if I ever got one. And so like, that's where my head goes. But I know that Danny Fountain, who you've interviewed, is also an INFJ and has like, 30 something tattoos?
Yeah. Bunch.
But I think that in a lot of ways, she also like, she's rebellious, but not at a place of confrontation. She's like one of the least confrontational people that I know, but she still has a very strong personality, strong opinions, and you either like her or you love her.
Oh my gosh, that's so true about Danny. And I kind of feel that way about you too, Joey. Like I feel that way about I want to say all the INFJs that I know. So here's how I see it. And this is just from my perspective. I am an ENFJ. This is totally my opinion. But when I think about the INFJs that I know, I see this deep down fire wave. I don't know. Some people have like that fire element, and some people I feel like have that really like fluid water element. That's a whole other thing. I'm getting super woo woo now, but it's just this like culminating building of purpose. And it's so much fun to watch an INFJ choose to step into that because it's always so grounded in exactly why they're here. And it's just so powerful because of it. That's how I see INFJs, especially in business. Like they are forces to be reckoned with, not in a loud way, but in an immensely powerful way, without the loud and without the chaos.
That's so interesting because my wife, I forget her personality type. She's not an INFJ, but she's like a corporate like firehouse. Like she's amazing at what she does. But when we're done with work for the day or during the weekend, like here I am working on like self-improvement stuff and like thinking about my goals. And she's like, I need to chill. And I'm watching Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And that visual of like having like a fired purpose, I think that's really interesting. And I don't know enough about the personality types as you do to kind of know kind of how each type has their own version of something.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely see how I have more of that than my wife does. And yet my wife is still a super amazing, successful businesswoman who's driven, but it doesn't look like that.
Yes. Well, I have to know your wife's personality type at some point. Like you can tell me that at some point later. But again, it just comes back to the fact that we do this thing called life, and within life, this thing called business, and within this thing called business, marketing differently. And it's all valid. It's all awesome as long as it feels good, because when you feel good, your audience feels good, and that's what's going to work. So great place to end, and just remind everybody that this is what we're doing here. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. Joey, I want you, just one more question. I want you to take us into your vision, because we know you're a visionary. I want you to take us into your vision for this company that you're building. Where are we going with Indie Law in the next year or so? Like, just give us a little peek.
The main sneak peek and like gut feeling that I'm continuing to move towards is this idea of being and feeling legit as a business owner. And we're working specifically with business owners that can be prone to depression, anxiety, or even just like a lot of like imposter syndrome, and helping them on the trademark side so that their brand is legit, and also just helping them give the confidence as a product-based business owner that they should feel legit as business owners and have that confidence and peace of mind that they are growing their brand, that they're serving their customers well. And yeah, creating, like I kind of alluded to earlier, this kind of new flavor of what it means like to work with an attorney and have it be like a growth-based legal strategy instead of just did I cover all my bases type of strategy.
Okay, so that phrase that you just dropped, growth-based legal strategy, that's totally different. That is not how most legal people, I'll just call them legal people, lawyers, attorneys, whatever. That's not how they're approaching this. And as an entrepreneur who is growth-minded probably to a fault at sometimes, I'm in, man. I'm so in for that. So in for that. And
thank you.
Confidence piece, man, it's so not, again, I'm just coming back to the whole thing of like, you so belong here, and I'm so glad you're here. And I want to give an opportunity to the listeners who are hearing you explain this vision and this gut feeling of where you're headed and where this whole thing is moving. I want to make sure that they can find you online and follow you and engage with you and message you directly if they need to. So where can the listeners find you online and support this vision?
Sure, I would love that. You can go on Facebook, facebook.com/IndyLaw. And then on Instagram, you can find me at Joey C. Vitale. There are a gazillion Joey Vitales in the world. So I threw my middle initial in there.
It's a common Italian, right? Italian last name?
Yeah, I actually flew to Italy to see my extended family a couple years ago. And on the plane, I was talking to someone who lived there but could speak pretty fluent English, and told him what my name was, and he knew exactly what neighborhood my family was. They're all Joe Vitales there.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make sure that you find the correct Joey Vitale on Instagram. Of course, that's linked in the show notes. And that's where Joey and I first connected, was on Instagram. So yeah, definitely go find him there. Joey, thank you so much for being here. Listeners, go find Joey. Get your trademarked, please, because it's so important. And I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Now it's time to connect your marketing strategy to your personality type. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to download your marketing personality type full report. Use the code MPP at checkout to get $10 off. And that's a super special code for podcast listeners as a way to say thank you for being here. In your full report, you'll learn about your personality type, how it relates to the work you do, what your best marketing strategy includes so you can start implementing it right away, what your worst marketing strategy includes so you can avoid it, and so much more. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to get your full report and use the code MPP at checkout to receive $10 off your purchase. And one more thing before you skip on to the next podcast. Would you please share this episode with your entrepreneur friends who also need to feel good about their marketing strategies? Take a quick screenshot of your podcast app right now and share it out via text, Facebook, or my favorite, Instagram. Remember to tag me at Marketing Personalities in the photo so I can be sure to send you a huge high five and thank you for sharing the love. This podcast is edited and produced by the Podcast Engineers. They're pretty great, and you can find them at podcastengineers.com. That's all for now. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Love ya. Bye.